Chapter 7. Surprise shot through Bubba as they pulled up to the station, and he noticed Felicity standing against the wall. His mother had said Felicity would try to see him today, but he had expected she would come to the house tonight, not show up at the police station. Though she hadn't appeared to change as much as his parents, the tight ponytail holding back her dark hair made her facial features appear more severe than normal. Felicity was not his biological sister. After he and his siblings graduated high school, his parents felt the desire to help more kids, and they began fostering. Felicity was one of those foster kids. She joined their family when she was 17, and Bubba was 21, so he was not as close with her as he was with his biological brother and sister. But when Jacob and Rachel had moved away, he and Felicity had spent more time together, and they had grown closer the last year before he left. Almost too close from Bubba's point of view, though. There had been a few times when he'd heard her mumble snide remarks once or twice when he brought a woman home to meet his parents, as if she had any say. Still, she was family, and she'd had a rough childhood, so Bubba had always dismissed it. "Why don't you take a few minutes to reconnect, and I'll come back for you when we're through?" Makenna asked, as if reading his mind. Bubba nodded and opened his door. "Matt Fisher, I can't believe you let me think you were dead for 5 years. He was unsure if the anger in her voice was real or forced, but before he could decide, she threw her arms around him in a giant hug. "I've been so lonely without you here. How could you just leave without a word?" she asked when the hug ended and she stepped back. "It was important to the case, Felicity. When the arsonist made an attack on me, Captain Drake figured we would all be safer if he thought I was dead." A dark expression took over Felicity's face for a moment as she watched Makenna walk inside. And then as quickly as it came, it was gone. "Turns out she was wrong, though, wasn't she? Since the murders have started again? So you lost 5 years of your life and put us through the ringer for nothing?" Bubba didn't appreciate the tone in Felicity's voice, even though that very thought had crossed his mind when Makenna first reappeared in his life. "She couldn't have known that, though. And I was worried the killer would go after you, or Mom and Dad. Plus, they didn't start again for 5 years, so for a while, at least, Makenna was right." "Well, anyway, it's good to see you again, big brother." She placed a hand on his arm and squeezed. "I've missed you." The last 3 words felt wrong as they landed on Bubba's ears, and his body stiffened. He didn't know why, but something in the tone of them had been off. Perhaps he was making too much out of it, though. Coming back to a town where everyone believed you were dead and stared and whispered about you was much harder than it had sounded initially. And it could be that he was the one off. He was definitely out of his comfort zone. "It's good to see you again, too, Felicity." He patted her hand before removing it from his arm. "You couldn't have missed me that much, though, since you didn't come over last night." Another cloud crossed her face for a moment, and then she smiled. "Yeah, sorry. I wasn't feeling well, and I had some work to catch up on. But you should come over for dinner tonight. Now that Roger and I are no longer together, I suddenly have a lot of free time on my hands." The idea of a dinner alone with Felicity sent the hairs on the back of Bubba's neck up, but it would be rude not to accept, especially since she was family. "Sure, that sounds good. I'm staying with Mom and Dad, so maybe we should all do dinner together there?" Her lips pulled into a tight smile. "Yeah, that would be great. I'll see you tonight." The door behind him opened as Felicity walked away. "Everything okay?" Makenna asked. He watched his sister walk away and tried to put a finger on what was bothering him, but it was still too ambiguous. "Yeah, fine. It's just weird being back here. Everyone feels different, or maybe I'm just different." She placed a hand on his arm, and Bubba's gaze dropped to the heat, creeping up his arm from her touch. How different her touch felt from Felicity's. "I know it's hard, but it will get easier." "I certainly hope so," he said as he followed her toward the station door. But as he grasped the handle, he wondered if that was true. Did one really ever get used to being the focus of town gossip? As the door swung open, a movement to the right caught his eye. He peered closer, but nothing appeared different. "You okay?" Makenna asked. "Yeah, I thought I saw something, but I must just be tired. I'm good." Still, he gave the surrounding area one more perusal before he followed Makenna inside. "I can't take you in the interrogation room, but you can watch the whole thing from here," Makenna said, showing Bubba into a small room with a few chairs. On either side were large windows that looked into the interrogation rooms. Skye sat in the room on the left, and Nick in the room on the right. She hadn't had many people watch interrogations, but the thought of Bubba on the other side of the glass sent her nerves coiling in her stomach. Was she afraid of messing up in front of him? Afraid of what he might think? She shouldn't care what he thought. He lived in Fire Beach, and her life was here. Besides, their schedules would probably never work. But she couldn't deny that there was something about Bubba. Growing up with 2 older brothers and learning to shoot rifles at the age of 12, Makenna was used to defending and taking care of herself. She'd always felt tough, and maybe a little too masculine. But Bubba made her feel feminine again. His 6'2" frame dwarfed her 5'7", and he exuded a protective vibe. She could imagine a life with someone like him, a life where she didn't feel like she always had to be the one calling the shots. "I'm going to talk to Skye first, and then Nick, though I doubt I'll get much," Makenna said, forcing her mind away from thoughts of curling up on a couch in Bubba's arms and to the task at hand. She turned up the knob to Skye's room. "This way you can hear us. When the interview is over, you can turn this down and turn the one on the other side up." "Sounds good. I've never been on this side before," Bubba said with a playful smile. "I bet I'll enjoy it more." Makenna swallowed the sting of embarrassment. Now that she knew him better, she couldn't believe she had ever thought he could be a killer. But she'd been greener then, and the evidence had pointed to him, what little they'd had. Still, as much as she wished she could erase that experience, it had made her a better cop. She didn't jump to conclusions as quickly, and she challenged herself to consider other options. "I'm sure you will," she said as she exited the room. She grabbed the folder with the case files from a hanging compartment outside of Skye's room and then pushed open the door. "Do I get to go home soon?" Skye asked as Makenna entered the interrogation room. "I thought this was going to be just a few quick questions." "I'll get you out as soon as I can," Makenna said, pulling out the chair across from Skye and sitting down. Her eyes wandered to the 2-way mirror, but she forced them back to the folder in her hand. "Now, tell me again where you were on the night of the 16th. Skye sighed and rolled her eyes. "I told you I was out with Nick." "Right. Your second date. Did he pick you up?" "No way," Skye said with a shake of her head. "I don't let a guy know where I live until the 5th date. Have to make sure he's not crazy, you know?" Makenna bit her lip to keep from laughing. This woman exemplified crazy, but didn't seem to recognize it. "Okay, so where did you meet?" "At Darby's, over on 6th Avenue. I wanted to go dancing, but he wanted dinner first, so we decided to meet up there." Skye ran her hand through her blonde mane, fluffing the hair as she did. "And what time was that?" Makenna asked as she made a note in the file. 7. I remember because we were only able to get 1 drink before their happy hour ended at 7:30. Who ends a happy hour that early? "I don't know." Makenna didn't drink, so she had no answer to the question. She'd only ever tried alcohol once, and it had been disgusting enough to turn her off it after that. She still remembered leaning against the tractor on a hot sunny day and watching her father pop the beer can open. The sound of the fizz had fascinated her, and she'd asked him for a drink. He'd paused, and then, evidently deciding it wouldn't hurt, he'd held the can out to her. The smell had hit her first, that weird yeasty odor, but being the fearless child she was, she had tipped back the can and filled her mouth, only to spit most of it out again when it hit her taste buds. That had been her first and last drink, so she had no idea what restaurants even had happy hours. "What time did you leave?" 8:30. I wanted to get into the Hop before they raised the price at 9. The Hop was the closest thing to a club that Woodville offered. A couple had purchased the old warehouse a few years ago and fixed it up. Makenna had broken up many fights in that place. And how long were you two there? Skye placed her hands on the table and leaned forward. Only till midnight. I had to work the next morning, and if I don't get a full 8 hours, this is a puffy mess the next day. She made a circle around her face. Midnight would be cutting it close. The fire was reported at 1 a.m., so she supposed Skye could have had time to get home, grab supplies, and get over to Peter's house. But every bone in Makenna's body was telling her that this woman was not a killer. I'm assuming you left the hop alone? No, I left with Nick. We had taken one car from Darby's, so he drove me back there. But I left Darby's alone, and so did Nick. Are we done now? I really have to get my nail fixed. She held out her hand and wiggled her ring finger. That nail didn't look any different than the others to Makenna, but she didn't say that. Almost. I have a few more questions, and I need to talk to Nick. But then I'll get you processed. Unless Skye said something revealing with the next few questions, Makenna didn't have enough to hold her, even if she wanted to. Do you know any of these women? Makenna pulled the photos of the 3 women out of the folder and spread them on the table. Her, Skye said, pointing to the fitness instructor. I took a few classes with her, but I don't know the rest. Okay, thank you, Skye. I'll be back in a minute. Makenna slid the photos back into the folder and exited the room. She had to question Nick, but she was certain his answers would be the same.